Welcome to Conversations with Sarah. I'm Sarah Reddan, creator of the SRTT Self-Care Club. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to be notified of new episodes. Today, I'm joined by Ian, a clinical hypnotherapist who uses virtual reality therapy and EMMETT technique. Hi Ian, thank you for joining me.
Hi Sarah, thank you very much for inviting me on.
It's my pleasure. So we met through the Northern College of Clinical Hypnotherapy, where we are both the tutors. And I am fascinated by the EMMETT technique that you've talked about and like virtual reality therapy. For me, it's so interesting. So I'm really excited to hear you talk about the way that you work and your story of how you got into therapy. So for those who don't know you, are you happy to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, my name's Ian. I suppose it's quite strange coming into or being a therapist sort of in your mid-50s, but I was a police officer for 26 years and I damaged the back of my neck. And I pretty much went through the medical system and I was written off basically. They just said, there's nothing we can do for you. Just put your feet up and basically, you know, just ferment really. Both my children are into horses and I said to my daughter one day, you need to do something else apart from riding in school and horses in case you fall off as you get older. And we went on a one-day EMMETT for horses course. And I just went along just to give her some company. But what had happened is I'd been bad for about 15 years. So I was suffering from chronic neck pain, but obviously the body adjusts itself. So I ended up with shoulder pain, back pain, and I had extremely painful plantar fasciitis in my feet. So anyway, we're there on this one-day course, just a taster. And I was telling the instructor there, you know, how I felt one thing or another. And they went, leave that with us. We'll do it at lunchtime. We'll sort that in 15 minutes. And I just thought, you're having a laugh here, you know. Yeah. I just thought, yeah, okay, you know. So anyway, we went in at lunchtime and they said, take your shoes off and just stand there. And all they do is put the finger on certain points of the body. And I'm starting to move around and release. And I'm thinking, this is just weird. Anyway, it was kind of fun. We're all having a good giggle and a good laugh. The next day I get out of bed and I've got no pain in my feet. Well, it was probably down to about a 2, but I'd been living life around about anywhere between 8 and 10. Every day was just a nightmare. And I think for your listeners, that's when you're in chronic pain every single day, not only do you have your pain, but you become depressed. And the more you become depressed, the more the pain kicks in. So anyway, I got out of bed, very little pain. And I thought, wow, this has just changed my life. So I rang up and says, I want to go on a course. And that's how this all started. So I trained as an EMMETT therapist, initially on horses, and then I joined on the human course. And the way the EMMETT works, Ross Emmett is an Australian guy, and he invented this. But for your listeners and those that can't see, basically, it's very much like Shiatsu. So you've got points on the body. So in Shiatsu, you've got meridians. We don't use meridians. We just use specific points. And by crossing points over, you're getting a release of the fascia. So whilst it's not like Shiatsu, it's probably the easiest thing to relate to. Yeah. So by placing points on the body, you actually release the fascia that in turn releases the muscles. That then creates more blood flow, gets lymphatics working, and of course it affects your nerves and takes the pain down. So that's how I got into being a therapist. But I very quickly realized that actually it was more than just a physical therapy. Although I release the body, the mind goes with it. So we're both connected. And what I'd found personally through the NHS or through the Western style is, if you go to a hospital and say, I've got a sore shoulder, they don't for 1 minute go, how's your hips? Have you got a bad knee? Is your ankle bad? So they'll x-ray your shoulder and go, well, there's nothing wrong with that. And you live in complete pain, completely unaware you've got bad hips or a bad knee. So I found that once you release the body, the person thinks positive, the body starts to heal. I deal with people with some quite chronic illnesses now, sort of Parkinson's. I had a lady yesterday, she'd had a bad back for the best part of 10 years. I treated her for an hour and she's walking around going, the pain's dropped, I've got more flexibility. She was doing squats and she's going, I wish I'd met you 10 years ago. Wow. But she's been through the system and basically there's not a lot we can do except give you tablets. So mainly for your listeners, it's about looking at alternative therapies, no matter what they are. Have a go, you know, one of them will work for you. And it's about, you can't fix your problem, but you can make your quality of life great again. And I think that's the main thing, because we put a label on something. You know, if you've got Parkinson's, that's it, you're doomed. Or if you've got any other ailment like fibromyalgia, you're doomed. Whereas you're not. You can still get that quality of life. You have to adjust, but you can get that quality of life back. You can look positive. You can feel positive. You can go back on holiday. You can go out with the family. You can do stuff. And that's really what this was all about. So I then realised that the big bit that was missing was the brain, because the brain is controlling everything. So that's how I got into hypnotherapy, to mix and match, if you like. So I released the body, and then I reaffirmed that by doing hypnotherapy. So.
How powerful. So I wonder, with your background in policing, was this something that you were kind of open to beforehand, or was that first experience of EMMETT like a real eye-opener for you?
It was a real eye-opener, to be honest, because I think we're all brought up, and I use the word institutionalized, but we're sort of we go with society. And if we are told by a doctor there is nothing that can be done, we just believe them. And the Western technique is very mechanical. It's very much, we have to prove everything. Whereas with a lot of the Eastern stuff, now, I mean, it's funny, I was dealing with someone with Parkinson's, and when I was going through my Shiatsu books, I'm studying Shiatsu now. I mean, at my age, I'm 60 now, and I'm doing a 3-year course on Shiatsu, but it's so fascinating. And there's actually a point on the head for Parkinson's, and you're thinking, this is 3,000 or 4,000 years old, the technique. They knew more than we give them credit for, you know. So no, this was all new to me, and it was quite a revelation when you know you're bad, you're thinking you're bad, the body gets worse, and then someone comes along and within 20 minutes have given you more mobility, you've reduced your pain, and you just think, wow, this is amazing. And he's, in fairness to Ross, he's now got it in something like 40 countries. So he's going worldwide with it. So, you know. Yeah,
I hadn't heard of it before I met you, so that's why I was so interested, because it's right up my street with the whole working with the body and the way the body hold emotions and all of that lot. So it's fascinated. And of course, if I've not heard of it, it's like, well, everyone else needs to hear these things. Because if this is the field I work in, I mean, there's so many therapies and there's so many different ways of working. It is often, isn't it, finding the one that kind of resonates for you and fits and works with what you need, and sometimes that changes as well. So this is another one where we can go, hey, this exists. So when you do a treatment with the EMMETT, is that always in person?
It is, yes. It's kind of weird because during lockdown there was other therapists that do Reiki and other things, and in fairness, I have done Reiki, but from my point of view, I was a big rough bloke sort of thing, doing building work with that. Reiki was a bit woo-woo. It's off the scale. You can't identify it. You can't understand how it works. So to me, I like to understand things. I have had a go a couple of times with friends. There are other therapists, and I've said, look, I'd like to try this, because there's a couple of Reiki masters who do the EMMETT technique, and they said, oh, we're doing this online now. And I'm thinking, how on earth do you do that? So anyway, I had a Zoom call with her, and I said, how on earth do you do it? She says, treat me as though I'm sitting next to you, and just put your fingers on the parts of my body you can see. So basically, she just sort of moved away from the camera, and she stood up, and I just treated her as if I was there. And when I was doing it, I could feel energy, because when I treat and I touch people, you get that sort of whoosh of a power, you know. And I got the same sensation on one of her shoulders. So anyway, she says, well, how did that feel? And I went, it's a bit weird, just, looking at a screen and sticking my fingers out. And I said, but I got a bit of a whoosh when I touched your shoulder. And she went, that's my bad shoulder. Yeah. And I thought, that freaks me out a little bit. So I had another go with another friend. And he turned his back on me, so I was working on his back. And he turned around and said, you've just put your fingers on my shoulders. And I'm thinking, this is weird. So that sort of freaks me a little bit, because that isn't me. So
it's just stretching a little bit your kind of belief system, I guess. I mean, I'm very much kind of like, I like the logical. I would say I'm quite woo, probably more woo than I present as, actually. But it is that looking for that logical explanation, is it? And some of this stuff does feel a bit like, what? But if we accept that everything's an energy being and energy can interact, then it makes sense. But we have to be really open-minded, and I'm with you that at times I have experiences that I'm like, let's look for a more logical explanation.
Yeah. So I mean, I've done a few things where we can do EMMETT physically, but hands off. And I remember it was quite touching. I went and did a talk on it. And this young girl, bless her, she'd got a similar problem to myself. She got hindbrain hernia. She had a real issue, and she'd had an operation, and she was on sticks. So anyway, I was just treated to release the body, because the body tightens up. And anyway, her parents were there. I mean, the girl was in her 20s probably, and her parents were there. And as I was touching her body front and back, she turned around and says, "Oh, look, I'm standing on my own, but that's because Ian's touching me." And I just moved my hands away. And her mum started crying because I wasn't touching her. You know, when I moved away, she was still getting the result, but physically I wasn't touching her. And that was quite touching. So I'm thinking, oh, perhaps I shouldn't have done that, you know. But it is, I find it's very hard when you've been told that this is impossible.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Like you said before, we've got this kind of societal conditioning, Western societal conditioning, that it's the medical model is the model. All the energy stuff is a bit like it's for crusty hippies who just like sit around. And actually it isn't. And I think now we're having more of these conversations. There's much more, inverted commas, mainstream people that hold the possibility. And that for me is the thing, it's holding the possibility. Because all of these kind of more woo practices are thousands of years old. They predate what we know now as science, and science itself says it doesn't know everything. And I like, you know, I think it's being open to these possibilities. If they help and they help make a difference, surely that's the most important thing. If we're there, you know, someone who was practically bedridden, told by Western medicine, there's nothing we can do, you just have to deal with it. We can start looking at other stuff that makes a difference to your quality of life. Does it matter whether you really believe in it? Does it matter if you can go from being on crutches to not being on crutches? The proof's there. Do we have to believe it? I think not.
I've had quite a few people where we've mixed hypnotherapy and the physical touch, and they've been ill for 20 and 30 years, and they've completely changed, but it's their attitude. So they've still got the ailment, but they go back to a normal life, and that's quite touching. I think we just, in reality, we get worse, don't we? Because we don't see a way out. There's no light at the end of that tunnel. So,
and like I say, with the hypnotherapy, it's like the power of the mind. There's so much that we don't know yet about what our mind can do. And I guess mixing that body therapy and mind therapy, you see even more I can't use my words today, like dramatic. Do you see more improvements with clients using the two together?
I've had two people now with Parkinson's. One was a friend of mine, and another one was a client. They've both been on sticks for a while. One certainly 7 or 8 weeks, so they couldn't physically walk without the sticks. And within an hour of treatment, they're walking up and down going, I can't believe this, I've got my balance back. You know, I'm actually moving around. So it's almost unbelievable, some of the things that have occurred. But they then get to a point where they shut down again, because one in particular was a nurse, and they go, but this can't work.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, it can, it has worked, you've seen it. And you go, do you feel better? And they go, yeah. Are you positive? Yeah. Are you sleeping now? Yeah, I'm having a really good night's sleep. And you're going, but the sleep is the important part, because that's when we heal. So, but I think we live in a society where everything's instant gratification. If you can't get fixed by tomorrow, it doesn't work. A lot of people aren't happy to look 6 months ahead and say, well, actually, I'm improving step by step.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's for a lot of us, it is changing lifestyle. So a lot of us when I say a lot of us, I mean me, burn out because we kind of do too much, we take on too much, we maybe don't have boundaries, we like people pleasing, do all the things that we think we need to do for everyone else, and we burn out.
Yeah.
Then we do whatever therapy is to really look after ourselves and get better, and then go back to the patterns of doing way too much, and sort of like, well, it's not working because I can't do everything I did. And it's like, well, actually, maybe doing everything you did isn't that good for you, because we are under so much stress, I think, as a society. Even like all the noise, all the sounds, that's the same thing, the lights, all of like just busyness all of the time. It's so stressful for our bodies, and I think we don't realize what things are stressful because we're so used to it. Our nervous system's just like pinging off all over the place. Like you say, we're not sleeping, not drinking enough water, maybe not eating nutritionally, not taking time to rest, not having downtime. And our bodies, well, for me, I know definitely, it just sort of went, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, look after yourself, not about it. And if we get recovery and then think we can go back into doing everything and it doesn't work, we think the treatment hasn't worked, as opposed to our lifestyle is not supportive of health.
And also I think the way doctors explained it, I remember when I had the problems, I mean, I was waking up in the middle of the night, the pain was immense, and the doctor said to me, it's all in your mind. And I could have thumped him. I remember standing up and almost confronting, going, this pain's real, I'm not making this up, I'm too busy. I was building my own house. I was building a horse box. My kids were going to horse. I hadn't got time to be ill. But I think if they could explain it better, and this is where I find with the hypnotherapy, it's really fascinating. We're going about the fight or flight, and it's very much based on that stress. So we say to people, oh, when you're in danger, we trigger this fight or flight. But actually, the body's doing that all the time. And there was an interesting program the other night. It was Dr. Mosley. And he was on about sleep, and basically they deprived him of sleep for 24 hours or 36 hours, wherever it was. But what they noticed was that the endocrine system, which is our fight or flight system that produces the chemicals to run and to breathe and to the stomach and all that sort of stuff, they were actually being triggered because he wasn't asleep. So the body was becoming stressed and put in the danger zone just because he hadn't slept all night. And that's fascinating. When you look at emergency service personnel who work shifts, it's not about a conscious stress as such. It's the fact that your body is trying to keep you in a homeostasis state. It's trying to keep you balanced. And if you don't sleep, it's producing chemicals to try and help that out. And then suddenly the whole body goes to pot after that. So I found that program very interesting. You know? So it's not just about everyday stress. The body's producing it. We're not even aware of it. It's about lifestyle.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. Because we think we're not stressed because we're like used to levels of stuff being the way that it is. And we don't consider like the junk food that we eat put stress on our body. I like a bit of junk food. I'm not saying don't eat it, but it does. Sugar puts a stress on the body. Like you said, not sleeping. We're not going through the systems that we need to do to like relax and reset everything. And it is just, you're coming into your day already, your systems are in a heightened level of stress, because we think stress is like just an experience of the mind, don't we? As well, what I experience sometimes when I'm speaking with people is that it's like, well, I'm not stressed, there's nothing happening, like life's really good. It's like, but you're not sleeping and you're like doing all of these other things that actually is putting pressure on your body. So it is just that reset. I'm noticing we're kind of getting into the time, and I really want to explore a little bit more about the virtual reality stuff that you do, because I'm fascinated by this. So this is what you do, like your online work, isn't it?
It is. When I first took this on, you did it face to face basically. So I sat with a laptop and I gave them a headset. So how this works, and again, it's like hypnotherapy without hypnotherapy. You are immersed within that. So part of the way the brain holds information is if you do it, it becomes a memory. So when I was taking this out, I took it into the office and says, I don't know whether to do this or not. And one of the girls said, I've got OCD. I would go and see if it works. So we have about 50 or 60 scenarios on there, from everything from OCD, fear of spiders, flying, heights, you know, all that sort of thing. So we put the headset on, and a bit like hypnotherapy, if you can have a laugh and a joke when you're doing it, it goes through much quicker. So we were all there having a laugh and giggle. So one of them is taking you into dirty toilets. Now that sounds a bit weird, but it's not the toilet. It's just a fear, if you like.
Yeah.
So I can control them. I'm on a platform, and what I do is I can control and stop stuff and move stuff and decide where you're going. And that's the only difference between hypnotherapy. Because if we were doing, for example, flying, I can hypnotize you and say, I want you to go on board an aeroplane, but I've no idea where that is or where you're sitting or what you're doing or anything like that. Whereas when we're doing this, we're positioning everything. I'm watching you. I'm watching what you're watching on the screen. So basically, we took her into these dirty toilets. Then I took her into a lift, and I took her down in the lift to a basement where it was very narrow. And when she got out of there, she went, oh my God, this stinks in here. And that was really interesting because all of the senses are being triggered like hypnotherapy. Anyway, we did a few other scenarios, and then at the very end, we've got relaxation ones. So probably spent an hour with her. The next day, I didn't realise how bad she was. She actually used to bleach her hands, and she was very paranoid about cleanliness and germs. And she emailed me and she went, I got up this morning, didn't even wash my hands. Well, I washed my hands, but I didn't bleach them. She then, when COVID started, she had sent me an email and she said, you're not going to believe this. I am not bothered. And she says, I can tell you now, I would have been sat in the corner with a bottle of bleach. Now, that was just after 1 hour's treatment. And I've had loads of results like that. It is quite amazing. So you're being immersed within your fear. And we take it steady, don't get me wrong. If you're around people, you have a bit of a laugh, it's even more fun because you can drop them deep end a bit more. So I had a friend around the day, she was going down to having a weekend away at the coast, and says, I hate going on the pier when you look through the wooden slats to the sea because of the height. And I said, oh, I'll have a bit of a laugh. So I put the headset on, and I took her up in a glass lift, 100 floors, and you've got a glass floor. I mean, it's kind of freaky. She's getting a bit panicky. And I said, don't worry, just have a bit of a laugh with it because it's not real. You can take your goggles off at any time. And the fact that you're facing a fear, knowing it's not real, takes away that barrier to a certain extent. So anyway, I then put her in a window cleaning cart and took her up 100 floors, and you've got the wind whistling and everything. And then I walked to between two skyscrapers on an open checker plate bridge. Now, I've done this before but anyway, she emailed it the down the coast, says, I've just walked down the pier, it didn't bother me, you know. So that was just the one off. There was a lady who wanted to climb Kilimanjaro, and she was frightened of flying and heights, and you think, well, that's not a good combination.
No, okay.
So we did the same with her. And the aeroplane one, you're actually sitting in the seat, the window's there, you can look out the window. I mean, it's just, you are in the midst of that. You look around, there's people sitting to you, you can hear the conversations going, you hear the engines and everything. So we did all that. And I did the same with her. I took her in the glass lift and everything else. And as we're going to cross this checker plate between two skyscrapers, I said, it doesn't matter if you don't believe this is real or not. Whatever you do, don't close your eyes, because your brain's taken all of this in. It's full in your brain. And when we'd finished, she said, I was going across going, this isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. She said, I was cacking myself. And to make it worse, I'd actually put a fan on, so her hair was blowing. So you've got the noise of the wind whistling, and she's feeling this tremendous wind off this fan. Anyway, she went up, she went off and did a course, and there was one point where it was a scrabble and a 300-foot drop. And she said, I just stood there and looked down. It didn't bother me. So I just find it fascinating because it's a very quick way of fooling the brain, because you're actually, the brain thinks you've done it. So it takes that fear away. So it's really quite amazing. Spiders, I did a little girl who, excuse me, was frightened of birds, and she would go out canoeing in the swans and things like that. We did it for an hour on Zoom again. And all she had to do was buy a cheap £10 headset, download an app, because since COVID, they've actually made it online. So you download the app, you give me a 4-digit code off that app, I connect up to your phone, you put it in a headset, and away we go. And we did this with this young girl. And the next day, her mum took her out on the canoe. She went down, the birds come out, she just followed them, didn't even bother. And she says, it's just amazing how quickly that works. So
Yeah.
I think this is the future, to be quite honest.
Yeah. It's so powerful though, isn't it? And it does, like, going back to what you said before, like the mind controls so much, and we don't realize like all these fears are just things we have imagined are scary. So if we can imagine they're not scary, it is just as powerful. But it is overcoming the conditioning that we have that, well, you know, this is a really serious thing and it must take years of therapy for me to get better. And like, it's I just think it's fascinating that you can do that in like one session of essentially watching a game, really, and just letting your mind know that, and letting your body know that it's safe to do this thing that previously it thought was really scary, and boom, it's shifted.
What I would say with the VR we've got, medical VR isn't as clear as a normal gaming site.
Yeah.
So it's made fuzzy simply because your brain has to make the picture up. So if you and I look at it, you know exactly what you know you're in a glass lift, but the edges are sort of blurred, if you like, and your brain is then making that picture more prominent. And that's exactly what we do with hypnotherapy. You know, we'll say, make those colours bright, do this and do that. And what I've noticed now is that they've upgraded the platform. They've now added in hypnotherapy as well. So they, and when we do, it's like open eye hypnotherapy. You go on to these, throughout whatever you do, and I can press a button and you will get a voice saying, breathe, focus on your breathing, and do this as we would in hypnotherapy or mindfulness or whatever therapy you're doing. So they're mixing and matching everything as well. So that's what I find fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that is the way forward, isn't it? It's just bringing these different types of therapies together. Like, I'm very much, I think using massage helps. Like, we think massage is just this kind of, you know, relaxing thing, but actually I think there's so much deeper, there's so many more layers to all of the different therapies, and there's so much that we can do to support our health if we can just be open-minded to the idea that these things can help. And maybe not everything is going to fix everything in just one go. It is ongoing, creating new habits. So I feel like we probably are about at the end of time. So if this feels all right with you, do you feel like you've covered everything you wanted to share today?
Yeah, I think so. The thing I would say to people, if you have got a chronic illness, or if you're not feeling well, or you know your doctor's told you there's no hope, there is hope out there.
Yeah.
And it's just a case of go out and do as many therapies as you can and see which one works for you, because you can change your life. It worked for me. So
yeah, and that's I would say the same. It's, you know, I have a different type of life, but it is so much better than it was when I was ill and diagnosed and told, hey, this is life, get on with it. We do have the power to make changes. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming and talking.
Thank you.
Ian. Thank you. For those that have listened, I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. To find out more about me and my guests, you can find me on Facebook at SRTT Self-Care. I would love to connect with you. I'll be back next Wednesday with a new guest. Until then, stay curious and be kind to yourself.